Since its early days, the United States has been a refuge for people fleeing peril in their homeland. Across the world, people living under dictatorship, persecution, in fear of their lives and the lives of their children have dreamt of reaching the shores of the land of the free. This most basic principle is part of our DNA as a nation of immigrants, and it's at the heart of the Temporary Protected Status Program, or TPS. Time and again, however, the Trump administration has turned its back on these principles, and today's report documents something we have become all too familiar with: the administration seeking to use foreign policy not to further U.S. interests, but the president's political aims. Established by Congress as part of the 1990 Immigration Act, TPS has extended vital humanitarian protections to individuals unable to return to their homeland due to armed conflict or natural disasters, until now. Back in 1990, Congress could never have imagined that someday an administration would knowingly deport TPS recipients back to dangerous conditions. An administration would discard collective warnings of our diplomats in favor of a politically driven decision to advance the president's anti-immigrant agenda. However, as we see in the thoroughly researched report by the Senate Foreign Relations Committee minority, that is exactly what happened. Our report, Playing Politics with Humanitarian Protections, is a disturbing look at the administration's cruel decision to strip nearly 400,000 people of TPS, threatening their safety and American national security. This expansive investigation into the Trump administration's efforts to end TPS for El Salvador, Honduras, and Haiti reveals how officials rejected basic facts and politicized the process. It draws directly from internal State Department documents and exposes how the Trump administration deliberately disregarded the catastrophic consequences of terminating TPS for these three countries. In dozens of pages of unclassified documents, career officials throughout the State Department alerted the administration of the potentially devastating fallout of their decisions to terminate 3 TPS designations. They warned that it would undermine our efforts to combat drug trafficking and gang violence, that it would set off a new wave of migration towards the United States, and that TPS recipients would return to countries gripped by terrifying violence and governments unable to enforce the rule of law or ensure their safety. Finally, they warned the administration about the dangers posed to tens of thousands of American citizen children that accompany their TPS recipient parents back to countries like El Salvador, Honduras, where they would face crime, violence, and recruitment by illegal actors like MS-13. Yet the Trump administration deliberately disregarded these warnings. Yes, Trump administration officials were willing to cast aside the lives of American children to advance the president's bigoted and politically divisive anti-immigrant agenda. In a private appeal to then-Secretary Tillerson, former Undersecretary Thomas Shannon, then the highest-ranking career diplomat in the State Department, wrote that, quote, "It is our purpose to provide the best foreign policy advice possible. From my point of view, that advice is obvious. Extend TPS for the countries indicated." Instead, our investigation revealed that in 2017, the Trump administration's political appointees provided Secretary Tillerson with written recommendations to, in fact, accelerate the termination of TPS with the 2020 election timeline in mind. It's appalling. These political appointees literally advocated for the accelerated termination of TPS to strip hundreds of thousands of people of their legal status so that it wouldn't be an electoral liability. This report comes at a time when the American people are getting an unvarnished view of how President Trump and his administration have put politics ahead of our national security and weaponized U.S. foreign assistance for political gain. This is yet another ugly chapter of how the Trump administration has corroded the basic functions of our government with self-interest and political calculation. This time it was to advance the president's xenophobic immigration policies. This is shamefully reckless behavior and fundamentally un-American. When Secretary Tillerson formally recommended that DHS terminate TPS for El Salvador, Honduras, and Haiti, he acknowledged the adverse consequences. He wrote that ending TPS would generate a backlash and that the governments, particularly El Salvador and Honduras, quote, may take retaliatory actions counter to our long-standing national security and economic interests, like withdrawing their counter-narcotics and anti-gang cooperation with the United States, reducing their willingness to accept the return of their citizens, or refraining from efforts to control illegal migration. At another point, Tillerson recognized that weak rule of law in El Salvador and Honduras, quote, will make it difficult for their governments to ensure the protection of returning citizens, no less the U.S. citizen children who may accompany their parents, close quote. Let that sink in. Those are the words of the former Secretary of State acknowledging that this policy would likely damage U.S. national security, undermine the administration's own efforts to address drug trafficking and migration, and even endanger the lives of TPS recipients and their American children. So make no mistake, the administration knew exactly what it was doing. Consequences be damned. However, Tillerson's comments pale in comparison to the alarm bells sounded at all levels of the State Department. In one truly chilling example, the U.S. Embassy in El Salvador informed Trump administration officials at the NSC, State Department, and DHS that, quote, the lack of legitimate employment opportunities is likely to push some repatriated TPS recipients or their younger family members into the gangs or other illicit employment. So let's be clear. These decisions directly endangered American children and American families, potentially giving them no choice but to join a gang and increase the gang's membership. We're talking about 400,000 TPS recipients from El Salvador, Honduras, and Haiti who have been productive, integral members of our communities for decades. And for some 273,000 American citizen children, these TPS holders are simply mom and dad. 273,000 American citizen children. Without TPS, these parents will be forced to decide between bringing their children back to countries that are completely foreign to them and unable to protect them, or leaving them here in the United States in yet another wave of forced family separations by this administration. Either way, we are talking about inflicting serious trauma on American children, yet another despicable chapter in the Trump administration's ongoing anti-immigrant, anti-family, and anti-American agenda. I'm going to introduce two of my constituents. After they speak, I'll answer a few questions before we go to our panel, and after they speak, maybe say a few words for some of our Spanish press that is here. I now have the honor of introducing two New Jersey constituents who this decision directly impacts. Juana Villanueva is a TPS holder who has lived in the United States since 1998, and her 19-year-old daughter, Liana Taracena, is an American citizen born and raised in Newark. As a single mom, TPS is Juana's lifeline. It allowed her to get to a driver's license and find decent jobs. From cleaning houses to working at a laundromat, Juana has been able to provide for her daughter in New Jersey and family back home. Leanne studies psychology at the College of New Jersey and has a scholarship for academically talented students with financial need. She fundraises to bring medicine to developing countries. And if that wasn't enough, Liana has been fighting for TPS holders like her mother. Liana and Juana are here today to talk about the stress caused by the Trump administration's efforts to end TPS. Liana calls her mother her backbone, but without TPS, they'd be separated indefinitely. Having visited Honduras as a teenager, Liana witnessed the violence that persists in her mother's hometown. She worries about her ability to finish her college education and the personal and financial stress that would result from her mother's deportation. Ladies and gentlemen, Liana and Juana are the kind of success stories made possible made possible by TPS. And their success is a testament to what truly makes America great. So it's my pleasure to introduce them to you. I hope the report serves as a wake-up call for all of us to continue to advocate for them and for tens of thousands of others struck in an incredibly precarious situation.